හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 8th of November 2023. Infrastructure investment. Sri Lanka's Colombo West Container Terminal to be developed with $553 million financing from the United States in a joint project of India's Adani and Sri Lanka's John Keells. Sri Lanka cricket dilemma. Draft bill on new SLC constitution handed over to Cabinet Subcommittee. Subject Minister requests support of President and Parliament to prevent the interim committee being banned. SLC meanwhile to form independent committee to probe audit reports. Renewable energy. Energy Minister orders to accelerate evaluation of 6 renewable energy projects with hopes to add over 1,000 megawatts to national grid in the next 3 years. Budget 2024. Ceylon Chamber of Commerce says government should target developing tourism, BPO, shipping and logistics industries through the upcoming budget.
They will do the necessary, or rather the budget will focus largely on how we can increase our tourism from currently 4 million tourism. How the infrastructure around the to our marketing around the
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very warm welcome to you to your primetime English news service. We take you straight to your top story tonight. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation committed financing of $553 million through private sector loans to develop the West Container Terminal of the Port of Colombo. The Colombo West International Terminal Private Limited is a joint venture between Sri Lanka's John Keells Holdings and India's Adani Ports. Speaking at an event this morning, CEO of Development Finance Corporation Scott Nathan said the project will expand Sri Lanka's shipping capacity, create greater prosperity for the island without adding to sovereign debt. The project is expected to be completed ahead of schedule by end 2025. Meanwhile, CEO of Adani Ports and Special Economic Zones, Karan Adani, said this is the largest foreign direct investment to Sri Lanka in a single project.
The United States International Development Finance Corporation today committed lending of $553 million for the development of the West Container Terminal of the Colombo Port. The terminal is a joint venture between Sri Lanka's John Keells Holdings with a stake of 34%, Sri Lanka Ports Authority owning 15%, and India's Adani Ports, which owns a 51% stake in the West Container Terminal. This event was graced by DFC Chief Executive Officer Scott Nathan, CEO of Adani Ports and Special Economic Zones Limited Karan Adani, Chairman and CEO of John Keells Holdings Krishan Balendra, President's Chief of Staff Sagal Ratnayaka, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri, US Ambassador in Colombo Julie Chung, and Indian High Commissioner in Colombo Gopal Bagle.
Despite the challenges, I think the results on the macroeconomic performance is there for everybody to see. I reserved when I took over the finance ministry in April last year, $20 million have become almost 4 billion now. The inflation, which was running at around 70% in September, had come down, I think, negative 1% now, last month. Tourists have started to come, a massive comeback. Already we have received about 1.6 billion worth of US dollars inflows due to this. But if Sri Lanka to really make a comeback, growth need to take place, investment must come in, employment should be generated, and that's how the ordinary people will realize or share the growth of the Sri Lankan economy. These big players coming in with this magnitude of an investment and the transformation gives a very, very positive signal to the world that Sri Lanka is ready for investment, Sri Lanka ready for transmission, and Sri Lanka has lot of potential.
I had a chance to visit the site for the Western Container Terminal just this morning. It's so impressive, and I'm so glad to be here. And I really look forward to is coming back to visit a fully operating facility that's making such an incredible difference. So, and I really can't think of any project that's a better exemplar of that than the project we're here today to celebrate. A project that creates jobs for local communities. A project that supports economic growth at a time of high need for economic growth. A project that makes a difference for the national economy and truly for the international economy by having more capacity for deep water transshipment. The realities in this region and for global trade make this a critical addition to our global infrastructure.
In September 2021, India's Adani Group signed a build-operate-transfer agreement with the Sri Lankan partner John Kills Holdings plc and Sri Lanka Port Authority to develop the Colombo West Container Terminal. Construction work began in November last year and is expected to be completed by year 2025.
We are very confident that with the West Terminal, given the strategic location of the Colombo port, right next to the fast-growing economies of India and the other subcontinent countries, that the capacity of the West Terminal will also be absorbed very quickly. And there is potential for more new investment in the port to add further capacity.
This will be the largest FDI into Sri Lanka through a single project. When completed, this project will transform the socio-economic landscape not just in Colombo, but across the island through thousands of direct and indirect new employment opportunities and by massively boosting Sri Lanka's trade and commerce ecosystem. There has been no slacking of pace in our effort to complete the project ahead of schedule. I see this project as the first step through which three countries can foster cooperation in the development of sustainable infrastructure like smart and green ports, which will improve the efficiency of port operation and also align with global efforts to combat climate change.
The Sri Lanka cricket dilemma has been on the news and we have updates tonight. Addressing Parliament today, Minister of Sports Roshan Ranasinghe requested the President and Parliament to prevent the interim committee appointed for Sri Lanka cricket from being banned. Later at the party leaders meeting this afternoon, a joint proposal regarding the removal of office bearers of Sri Lanka cricket is yet to be debated in Parliament tomorrow. According to Chief Government Whip Minister Prasanna Ranatunga, the relevant joint proposal is set to be debated in Parliament tomorrow and subsequently put for voting in the evening.
විගණකාධිපතිතුමාගෙන් මම 2018 ඉඳලා 20යි 23 දක්වා සම්පූර්ණ ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එකක් ඉල්ලුවේ. තුමා කිව්වා එහෙම දෙන්න බෑ. එක කාරණයකට පමණක් දෙන්නම් කියලා. ඒ අනුව තමයි 20යි 20 ලෝක කුසලානයට පමණක් විගණනයක් කරන්න කටයුතු කළේ. මම අදත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා කතානායකතුමා. දෙන්න පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ නියෝගයක් විගණකාධිපතිතුමාට 2018 ඉඳලා 23 දක්වා ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එකක් කරන්න කියලා. එතකොට ඔය ක්‍රිකට් එක රකින්න නීතිඥයන්ගේ ත්‍රෙදි ගැලවෙනවා. දැන් ඊයේ අධිකරණයේදී දූෂිත ක්‍රිකට් පාලක මණ්ඩලය වෙනුවෙන් පෙනී සිටි නීතිඥවරු කියනවලු මේක සභාගත කරලා නැහැ කියලා. සභාගත කරලා තියෙන්නේ. මම දන්නේ නැහැ ඇයි නීතිපතින නඩු දාන්න බැරි කියන එක. නීතිපති මාස දෙකක් මේකට කල් මරනවා. මේ හොර කල්ලිය කරපු දූෂණ ජාත්‍යන්තර ක්‍රිකට් කවුන්සිලයටත් ආසියානු ක්‍රිකට් කවුන්සිලයටත් යොමු කරා. ආසියානු ක්‍රිකට් සංගමේ සභාපති ජේෂා මහත්මයාගේ කුඩේට මේ දූෂිත කල්ලිය ආවරණය වෙලා ඉන්නවා. මේ හොරු රැළ දූෂිතයින්ට ජනාධිපතිතුමා ළඟට ලං වෙන්න ඉඩ දෙන්න එපා. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ක්‍රිකට් පාලක මණ්ඩලය විසින් කෝටි ගණන් මුදල් වංචා කර ඇති බව ක්‍රීඩා ඇමති ලෙස මා පමණක් නොව ජනතාවම රටට කියාපාන අවස්ථාවක සහ කුසලා සරෝජනී වාර්තාව සහ විගණකාධිපති වාර්තාවේ කර ඇති වංචාවන් පැහැදිලි එලිකර තිබියදී අතුරු නියෝගය නිකුත් කොට ඇති අතර ඒ පිළිබඳ දැනුම් දීමේ නෝටිස් එක එදින 11:10ට පමණ අමාත්‍යාංශය වෙත ලැබුණා. මම නීතිපතිතුමාට කතා කරලා කිව්වා මේකට පෙනී ඉන්න කියලා. පෙනී ඉඳලා මේක බේර ගන්න කියලා. මට ලිඛිතව නැතුව පෙනී ඉන්න බෑ කිව්වා. මං කිව්වා ඔබතුමාට මම මෙසේජ් එකකින් එවන්නම්. නීතිපතිතුමා මග ඇරියා. මේක තමයි ඇත්ත කතාව. මනෝහර මහත්මයා කිව්වා මං කතා කරපුවාම නීතිපතිතුමාගේ උපදෙස් නැතුව මට පෙනී ඉන්න බෑ කියලා. මම මෙම තීරණය සඳහා යම් හෝ බලපෑමක් ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කාර්යාලයේ වගකී යුතු නිලධාරී හෝ ජනාධිපති උපදේශකවරුන් සිදු කළායයි ප්‍රකාශ කළ හැක. මේ ක්‍රිකට් එකට කඩේ යන නිලධාරියෙක් දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්න ඕන මේක ඇතුලේ. ජනාධිපතිතුමාට තීන්දුවක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. සූදු සම්මිද රොෂාන් රණසිංහද ජනාධිපතිතුමාට පහසුයි තීන්දුව කරන්න. ඊට පස්සේ කාර්ය මණ්ඩලයේ ඔය ඉන්න පුද්ගලයෝ ගෙනල්ලා ඔබතුමා බලන්න විමර්ශනයක් කළා. මෙයාලට කඩේ යන විදියට කැබිනට් එකට දන්වලා නැහැ. ජනාධිපතිතුමාට කියලා නැහැ කියලා කවුද උදේ මාධ්‍ය ප්‍රකාශය යවුවේ? ක්‍රිකට් එක වෙනුවෙන් මම එක අභියෝගයයි මම කරන්නේ. 2018 ඉඳලා ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එකක් කරන්න. පතුල හොයාගන්න බෑ කරලා තියෙන දූෂණ. මැච් ෆික්සින් කරලා තියෙන මේ රටේ ක්‍රීඩකයෝ නෙමෙයි. ක්‍රීඩා සංගමයේ ඔය නිලධාරීන් ලෝක කුසලානේ අද කොතනද ඉන්නේ? කණ්ඩායම එතන ඉන්න එකේ වගකීම ගන්න ඕන ඔය පාලක මණ්ඩලය. එතකොට තවත් කාරණා ඕනද මේක විසුරවන්න? පාලක මණ්ඩලේ ලොක්කෝ තමයි ක්‍රීඩකයෝ තේරුවේ. තේරීම් කමිටුව උනේ ආයේ පඹේ වෙච්ච එක. මේක තමයි ඇත්ත. මේ වගේ දූෂිත කල්ලියකට කොහොමද මේ විදියට ඉඩ දෙන්නේ? මම ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ සහාය ඉල්ලනවා. මොකද එතුමා එක්ක අපි හිටගෙන ඉන්නවනේ. අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමන් කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය ඇතුව ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයේ විපක්ෂයෙන් මේ දෙගොල්ලන්ගෙන් ඉල්ලනවා සහයෝගය. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ සහයෝගය ඕන ICC එකට මේක තහනම් කරගන්න එක නවත්ත ගන්න. තහනම් කරන්නේ කොහොමද? පාකිස්තානෙත් අතුරු කමිටුවක්, සවුත් ඇෆ්‍රිකාත් අතුරු කමිටුවක්.
රටේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට මේ සභාවට ඇවිල්ලා ප්‍රකාශයක් කරලා එතුමාගේ සහයෝගය අරගෙන අපි යෝජනාවක් සම්මත කරගනිමු. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ක්‍රිකට් හොර කල්ලිය අපි ගෙදර යන්නට ඕන. අපි සූදානම්. ඔබත් සූදානම්ද? සූදානම්ද? අපි මේ යෝජනාව සම්මත කරගනිමු.
හොඳයි බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
අද දවසේ ඒක කරමු.
සභාවෙන් යෝජනාවක් එන්න ඕන එක.
මන්ත්‍රීවරු 20ක් නැගිටලා විපක්ෂ නායකතුමාගේ යෝජනාව අනුමත කර නැගිටින්න 20ක් පාලක මණ්ඩලයේ පාස්පෝර්ට් තහනම් කරන්න. චෙක් ගෙවන එක සහ පාස්පෝර්ට් තහනම් කරන එක ඉක්මනට පාර්ලිමේන්තුව මැදිහත් වෙලා මේක කරන්න. නැත්තම් මේ අය රටින් පිට වෙනවා.
A draft bill pertaining to the introduction of a new constitution to Sri Lanka cricket has been handed over to the Cabinet subcommittee recently appointed to resolve issues surrounding SLC. According to the President's Media Division, the draft bill was handed over to the Cabinet subcommittee by the President's Secretary Saman Ekanayake on the instructions of the President. According to PMD, the relevant bill was drafted by a committee headed by Justice K.T. Chitrasiri. A 4-member Cabinet subcommittee was appointed on November 6th to look into a gazette issued by Sports Minister Roshan Ranasinghe, appointing an interim committee for SLC and also the future activities of Sri Lanka cricket. This Cabinet subcommittee, chaired by Minister Ali Sabri, comprises of Ministers Tiran Alas, Manusha Nanakara and Kanchana Vijayasekara. And Sri Lanka Cricket has decided to establish an independent committee to inquire into audit reports and make recommendations to ensure the prevention of corruption within Sri Lanka Cricket. Issuing a statement yesterday, Sri Lanka Cricket assured that it is committed to upholding the principles of integrity, transparency and accountability in the administration of cricket in Sri Lanka. SLC says it has taken proactive steps to invite respected individuals appointed by the Minister of Sports through a recent Gazette notification to form an independent committee. The independent committee will comprise retired judges, Supreme Court judges S.I. Iman, Rohini Marasinghe and retired High Court Judge Irangani Pereira. And we'll be back with more news on the other side of this short break on AdaDerana 24. Just stay with us. Welcome back. We take you to business news. Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says the proposed Personal Data Protection Act of the country will make Sri Lanka internationally compatible and post a digital trade growth in the country, supporting the economy. Joining a discussion on the Personal Data Protection Act, the Central Bank Governor said such law will also increase competition among industries while enabling innovation. However, the governor emphasized the need for supporting infrastructure to facilitate the digital growth.
Friedrich Naumann Foundation, in partnership with Heritage Partners, unveiled a publication on Personal Data Protection Act, its impact on cross-border data flows in Colombo last evening.
The drafting of the Personal Data Protection Act was a truly national and inclusive effort that has led to an internationally comparable and state-of-the-art data protection law, the first this kind of initiative in South Asia. This law thus makes Sri Lanka internationally competitive and able to build a digital economy that secures the rights of individuals as well as foster a new age of digital trade and economic growth for our development going forward. This avails new value-added services to the public while encouraging competition and mutually beneficial partnerships not only between commercial entities but even between governments. The Data Protection Act was primarily introduced to safeguard individuals' data rights, enable innovation and develop a digital economy. Much like the financial sector, the legal framework created by the Personal Data Protection Act would need to be supported by robust and resilient digital infrastructure and targeted capacity building of the populace, government and non-government institutions and businesses to optimize on the benefits of a digital economy. Individuals too need to be educated on their rights and value of their personal data. The public sector also has an important role in developing this culture and practice. This is where the authority has a big responsibility to educating and making awareness of both the public sector and the businesses and private sector. The country needs to appreciate the benefits of respecting and adopting personal data protection so that it can harness its full potential.
The event was also followed by a panel discussion on the proposed act and its impact on the digital sector and personal data of individuals and organizations.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka has reported an increase of 0.6% in Sri Lanka's official reserve assets from September 2023 to October 2023. Accordingly, official reserve assets increased to $3.6 billion in October from $3.5 billion in September this year. Central Bank said the reserves were supported by an increased foreign remittances. Issuing a report, Central Bank further said the increased reserves includes a swap facility from the People's Bank of China equivalent to around $1.3 billion, which is subject to constitutionalities on usability. And up next on our segment on budget expectations, Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Duminda Hulangamua, expects government to propose a budget targeting policy reforms essential to support short and medium-term goals for Sri Lanka's economic development. The Ceylon Chamber Chair emphasizes that the government should focus on developing Sri Lanka's tourism, BPO, shipping and logistics industries. Joining the 2024 budget expectations segment on AdaDerana, Hulangamua elaborated that while past budgets focused on stability of the economy, the upcoming budget should focus on providing a growth path for the country, prioritizing policy reforms to attract more investments and accelerating the growth trajectory.
Now that we have achieved some degree of stability because economic reform program, this year's budget we are expecting is a growth path. Last year's was stabilization and reform, but now we need to get on a growth trajectory. So we hope that with the contributions we also made to the government, that they will do the necessary, or rather the budget will focus largely on how we can increase our tourism from the current 2 million to 4 million tourists a year, how the infrastructure around that can be improved, how the marketing around that can be promoted. They need to see how we can improve the BPO IT industry, the service industry, how we can improve talent, how we can take the investments in the regions, and how we can increase the business from this sector, which is largely export oriented. Because Sri Lanka will find difficult in the short term, medium term to develop the industrial base to manufacture goods for export. So we feel that government should therefore consider the low-hanging fruits such as tourism and BPO IT industry. And other than that, you should get into is shipping and logistics, because we have an advantage in those areas. We need to see how the government will encourage more people, both domestic and foreign, to get into shipping and logistics business. These three areas to us as a chamber are the priority sectors to achieve some immediate results in the next 1 or 2 years. And of course, I'm sure the government will also announce what its plans are to improve agriculture. What we are talking agriculture means commercial agriculture, how we can get into large agriculture, both in the plantation industry sector as well as the agricultural sector, to increase the agricultural output. And then of course, with regard to exports, it's a medium-term strategy as to how we can encourage more FTAs to be entered into. That will give advantage to Sri Lankan exports to the eastern markets such as the ASEAN markets, and then also to enter into negotiate with India to see how we can increase export baskets for goods under the FTA and the quota. So we expect therefore this year that the government will introduce reforms that are necessary for growth, rather labour reforms, the land reforms, alienation of land, private sector and foreign investments, and how those blocked areas can be expanded by reforming and encouraging investment to those areas. So that is what we are basically expecting this year for the government to do, and we think the government should do this. Launch Chamber had a very close discussion with the government at 2 closed-door sessions on round table, where we discussed these policy issues that need to be addressed in order to take Sri Lanka to a growth path, and we hope and believe that the government will accept those proposals and enter into a growth path.
Well, the Colombo Stock Exchange on Monday announced the launch of regulated short selling through stock borrowing and lending. This is a new trading mechanism introduced to the Colombo Stock Exchange. To discuss its implementation and how successful it has been so far, we've invited to our studio's Chief Regulatory Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Renuka Wijewardena. A very warm welcome to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Divari.
I think the regulated short selling on SBL, it's new to us. You've sent us press releases saying the CSE will be introducing a new feature, a new mechanism, and that it was successfully implemented, launched on Monday. Take us through this. What exactly is regulated short selling, and what does it mean to enable lending and borrowing of stocks?
Yes, so I'm sure your viewers are familiar with how people borrow money from banks and financial institutions. This is not about borrowing money. This is about borrowing shares. So obviously there has to be a lender of shares and a borrower of shares. But you do that to facilitate regulated short selling. Now, short selling is actually selling of shares which you don't really own, because you borrow the shares, sell it in the market, but you have an obligation to buy back the shares at a later point and return the shares. So in a nutshell, that's how it works. So
you borrow it from?
From a lender. Any CDS account holder can join this scheme. We don't have restrictions. Anybody can be a borrower of shares. Anyone having certain types of shares. Now, not all listed shares are eligible for this mechanism. Right now, it's based on certain criteria that we have determined based on liquidity. About 30 shares are available. So if a particular person or a CDS account holder has those shares, that person can be a lender.
And what does this mean for an investor or someone who owns stocks that are idle? What does it mean to them?
So this actually provides a mechanism where a person who carries a portfolio who probably doesn't want to trade in the near future, he could lend those shares to a potential borrower and earn a fee-based income during that period. So that's the benefit to the lender, right? And the benefit to the borrower is that you borrow to short sell. You go to the trading system through the broker, you short sell the shares, then you get the sales proceed. But as I said earlier, you have to buy back the shares at a later point and return the shares to the lender. That's how it works. So ideally, from the borrower's perspective, he could capitalize on market price fluctuations. So if he thinks that a particular share is trading at a price which is excessive, he could then borrow and short sell. He gets the sales proceeds, but if his expectations work accordingly, then share price will when the share price falls, he could buy the share and return. So that's how the borrower makes a profit.
But what really is the benefit here?
Benefit to the market is, biggest benefit is, so I explain the benefits to the stakeholders, the lenders and borrowers. The biggest benefit to the market is it enables price discovery on the Colombo Stock Exchange, and also it also enables efficiency, market efficiency, which is a very important factor for any stock exchange. Because market efficiency is how well market prices have incorporated all possible information in an accurate way. Now, I'll just give a small example. So if somebody thinks that a particular share is undervalued, they could obviously buy the share. You could use your money, or you could borrow money from a margin provider or from a broker and buy. If somebody thinks that a particular share is overpriced, if you own the share, you can sell it. But the problem is, if you don't own the share, but you still think that this is overpriced, what are you going to do? Now, earlier, that person didn't have a mechanism. So that person's view was not reflected in the pricing earlier. So now, with SBL and short selling, what it has done is, that person could borrow and short sell, and that enables better price discovery, and that will also enable narrowing of these bid and ask spreads, which is the best buy quotation and best buy sell quotation, best sell quotation. So the gap has to be narrowed. That's how you create liquidity and better price discovery. and effective and ultimately enhance the market microstructure.
Will there be some sort of push to engage more foreign investors in the market with this mechanism?
Yes, they are all eligible for this. They could actually take part. If you are a foreign institutional investor, they could lend the portfolios. If you are a long-term investor, they could do that. Or they could also borrow shares. So it depends on their view. So we want to incorporate all their views in the pricing. That is the efficiency. That's how the price efficiency works. So I'm sure foreign institutional investors can play a major role here.
But there are risks with the implementation of such mechanisms. How would you evaluate those risks, and what are the risks really to market as well?
So common misconception actually about short selling is that a lot of people thought that it might enhance market downfall, especially in a market downfall situation. With short selling, it can aggravate the decline in the prices. So that's a bit of a misconception. So we have introduced this uptick rule. Uptick rule. So how uptick rule works is, if the share prices go down by more than 10%, all incoming short selling orders will be subject to this uptick rule, where the short selling order has to be one tick size above the current market value. So that will keep a bit of a check on the downfalls. And also, if the price has gone down by more than 20%, so no further short selling until the price recovers back to the permitted range. And as I said earlier, not all shares are eligible. So we have selected the most liquid shares which are traded in the market. So hopefully there will be enough liquidity, because borrowers need to go and buy back later, because you can't just short sell and forget about it. You need to go back and buy the share and return to the lender.
It's great news that such new mechanisms are being introduced, because we have been talking about new investment tools to other mechanisms. But at the same time, we know that the CSE and SEC have been conducting awareness programs on the new mechanism. But on a continuing basis, will there be engagements with the stakeholders? And
definitely there will be. In fact, we had a few sessions on on this particular mechanism before the launch with institutional investors, which was a huge success. So we'll do it for the retail investors. In fact, we had done a few sessions online, and through the branches we are continuing to do that. And also we are probably engaging with all these investor segments on a continuous basis.
Right, I think that's all the time we have tonight on First at 9, AdaDerana 24. We've been talking about regulated short selling, the newest feature mechanism introduced by the Colombo Stock Exchange. And we were talking to Chief Regulatory Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Renuka Wijawardena. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Moving on. The Colombo Bourse rallied for a third consecutive day, supported by the recovery in corporate earnings and continuous decline in interest rates at the weekly T-bill auction. Investor activity was mainly centered on the banking sector, which drove market during today's session. The benchmark index started off on a solid footing and maintained its steep upward trajectory, reaching an intraday high of 11,020 before closing at a month's high of 10,938, up 66 points. JKH observed notable collections from both retail and foreign investors, with the latter recording net foreign purchases of 151.8 million rupees. Turnover recorded at ₹1 billion compared to monthly average turnover of 936 million, primarily driven by capital goods sector contributing 41% and banking sector 2%. This is Udishan Jonas from Capital Alliance with some thoughts on the current status of the economy of the country in our next segment, Sri Lanka's economic outlook.
Over the last few weeks, we've seen the short-term treasury bill rates edge lower. And this week in particular, we saw the 3-month treasury bill rates fall by roughly 0.29% to 15.64%, and the 1-year treasury bill rates fall by 2 basis points, 12.99%. However, we saw the long-term treasury bond rates edge higher during the week, where the 5-year treasury bond yields edged up by almost 50 basis points. From a credit perspective, we saw the credit numbers pick up during the month of September, where the Sri Lankan banks have lent close to 69 billion rupees in terms of lending, which is one of the highest figures that we've seen over the last 3-4 months. And we believe that the demand for credit is stemming from the seasonal imports that are coming in for the month of December. Overall, from a market perspective, we are seeing a slight pickup in consumption of FMCG goods. However, consumer discretionary spending remains very subdued going into the Christmas season. Also, the market is eagerly looking forward to the fiscal reforms that will come in the November 13 budget. And a lot of concern is around tax collections and how the government will be looking at increasing tax revenues, which are expected to increase by roughly 30% going into 2024. On the external front, we saw the currency stabilize at around 326 to 327 rupees to the dollar, amidst a bit of pressure on the balance of payments owing to the seasonal demand coming in for imports. However, the good news is that crude oil prices edged lower roughly by $3 to the barrel this week, and this is owing to less concerns surrounding supply disruptions from the Palestine-Israel war, and also US increasing its oil production substantially during the last quarter. As a result, we don't see too much pressure on commodity prices going into the December season. From a financial perspective, we also saw money exiting from both equity and debt markets, and we feel that the stronger dollar is exerting pressure on money from frontier markets moving in developed markets.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara said instructions were given to the Ministry of Power and Energy, Ceylon Electricity Board and the Sustainable Energy Authority to expedite the evaluation, approval process and power purchase agreements of 6 renewable power projects. Taking it to Minister Vijayasekara said that all authorities were instructed to have the reports of all 6 projects by the end of the month, subject to environment and land clearance approvals. The proposed 6 projects will add 1,110 megawatts to the national grid in the next 3 years. Meanwhile, Minister Vijayasekara, replying to a question raised by opposition MP Gayantha Karunatilaka on solar panel distribution during Parliament gathering today, said that the government is working on laws that would enable the Sustainable Energy Authority to regulate solar panel importers and prices. He also added that the government had removed solar panel import duties on panel battery and inverter in order to make it more affordable. The Postal Services declared an essential public service through an extraordinary gazette issued by President Ranil Wickremesinghe this evening. Under Essential Public Services Act No. 61 of 1979, the Postal Service has been declared an essential public service after postal workers across the country went on strike against the decision taken to convert the Norelia and Kandy post office buildings into hotels. Earlier this afternoon, Minister Bandula Gunawardena revealed that he requested the President to declare postal services as an essential service. The United Postal Trade Unions Front launched a 2-day token strike this morning against the government's decision to sell the postal offices in Kandy and Norelia. However, the Department of Post stated yesterday that steps have been taken to cancel leave of all postal employees with immediate effect within 3 days of November 8th, 9th and 10th. Co-convener of the United Postal Trade Unions Front, however, said that postal workers stand ready to launch continuous strike if government fails to resolve the matter. And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9 on AdaDerana 24. Thank you for watching. I'm Indivadi Amuwatta. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.